think about the last time you faced a major change or setback, who did you turn to? Maybe your friend, a colleague, someone who had been there before. That instinct, that pull towards others when things get hard, that is not weakness. It is survival. It is strategy. And today we are going to talk about why community might be the most underrated tool in leadership, change, and resilience. Welcome to Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. I am Sreemedha, and this is where we explore the real human side of mental health, the stuff that actually helps when life gets messy, complicated, or just plain hard. And joining me tonight is Carlee Wolfe. Carlee, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I look forward to the conversation and really appreciate the topic.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you. And listeners, Carly is a global leader in talent and organizational effectiveness at Hyatt Hotels Corporation. And she's someone who has spent her career helping people and organizations move through change without losing their humanity. Carly, a lot of people think that leadership is about having all the answers or being the one who pulls everyone else forward. But when you think about the role of community in leadership, especially during change, how do you challenge that previous idea?
Yeah, I think it's two things. One is the narrative of leaders need to have all the answers. I think has long long gone and left. Yet we still kind of hang in this old storytelling, perhaps because I don't know. Perhaps it's easier. Perhaps it's in times of change things can feel uncertain and scary, and so we want a place to look to. And I'm not saying leaders don't have a responsibility or ability to lead and change. I think that is still very much true. And in fact, I think the a way to think about it is just a little bit different. And I think that sits in a space of having some openness of around what we know, what we don't know, what we're curious about, how we're going to navigate when we're still figuring the answers out together. I think those are all ways that leaders can show up differently in major times of change or constant change. And you notice at the end, I kind of hit the together part of it, which is the sense of community building. And I believe this is one of the new, or not new. It's just how are we bringing the concept of community and community building more into the forefront, particularly as we look at roles and positions in corporate jobs and larger companies. And the sense of that really just has to be with we learn really well from others in the sense that you might learn something that I didn't. Think about like AI, the experience that we all have, which is just there's so much change going on, we can't do it by ourselves. So to be able to have someone to bounce ideas off of, community in the sense of how we share information, bring ideas forth. I also believe as we look at how work happens, it's large, it's very rarely is it only tied to our individual job. And so you just naturally have to reach across the aisle, if you will, meaning like a process, a deliverable. And when we lead and operate with a community mindset, I think we have the we all rise together perspective in that, which is just immensely important and key when we think about performance as well. So that's really how I've been thinking about leadership, leading and change, and where community can be really powerful as we're in this, current, state of disruption.
Absolutely. And it's a very good reframe and a good way to look at it. So, Kali, when a leader starts to lean on their community, what does that actually look like in practice? I mean, what are they doing differently that makes it different from the idea of the leader pushing everyone forward we have?
Sure. I think first is even just saying, "Hey, I'm like connecting with others on this. I'm learning. I'm figuring it out." That in itself, I think, is a powerful statement. In one, you're signaling to others that you work with other people, not just on your own. Two, it shows some sense of, I think, both humility and resilience in that when we work with others, we can only really doing more together than we could do by ourselves. So I think that could be a very tangible first thing, which is just the concept of talking about partnering, working with other people. I think the other thing would be taking a look at, so if I lead inside of an organization, who are other leaders, my peers directly beside me or above me, or even this is I'm talking hierarchical, in different positions of the organization because there's room and space to learn there. And I think it starts with what's the work I'm trying to facilitate. And if I didn't have to do this all alone, who do I want to bring along with me? Whether it's to gather ideas, whether it's to test something out, it's to listen to some of the challenges or worries I have, to support me in bringing my team along. In other words, like a maybe I'm looking for a mentor for someone or a guide. So I think it is taking inventory of your network to say who can support me, who can be in my community. The other thing is also understanding that we are in community almost all day, every day. We're in meetings, we're having conversations, and those are by extension our broadest community in that who are we interacting with, engaging with. And I think with intention, we could be working through our days in ways of garnering support, gathering information, sharing information, learning together. And so that I think that's another tangible space, which is when you begin your day, how are you engaging with your network to both support and to move yourself and your team and at the end of the day, your function or organization forward. So I think those are maybe three big buckets from a general point of view, and this starts to cross over outside of, maybe we'll call team leadership, self-leadership, but just as a person leading in change or going through life, I spend time talking with folks about, and it's not a new concept, it's an old concept, but your own personal board of directors. There's a lot of studies, like, from a work standpoint, it's who's, like, closest to you that can help you continue to raise the bar. From a health and wellness standpoint, there's a lot of studies around the folks closest to you are those the ones that impact your life the most, and that can be in both a positive or a negative way. And so really spending some time thinking about who's on your board of directors, those folks, the 5, 7 at most, folks that are around you, spend the most time with you, who are in conversation or with you around what you want in life and work, and in person. I think that is worth paying attention to and keeping that up regularly, even if at a minimum that's something like every 6 months, but to have that conversation with yourself around who you're with, who's your closest community, and are they, and where are they influencing in your life is another really tangible, but certainly a little bit more in-depth way to look at that sense of community.
Absolutely. And that is a very uh I would say a different way of looking at it. And Carly, so for someone who's listening to this and feels isolated in the work or life right now, not necessarily in a leadership role, just maybe they're navigating a big transition or are dealing with something hard. So how does this idea of community show up in their everyday life and not just the big dramatic moments?
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge I think a lot of people are feeling this way. And that's not just a sense of thinking from my point of view. I mean, there's a lot of articles and research around this right now just because of the constant state of change, both large scale, global ch- change, but also personal change and how the economy is shifting, the uncertainty around where AI is playing a part in our lives. And then just, I think what you're asking is also just the day to day things. Like, the seasons are changing. I had a baby. I am trying a new hobby, right? All of these things come with that, with shift. And when I think about community in the range of what we all experience every single day, or what you're asking me is maybe where you're feeling that sense of like loneliness or like question, I believe it's not too far off of how, you and I were talking about from a work perspective of, what's going on around me and how can I tap into my network or my community to support. I think it's very similarly on that personal side. And it's really just looking at then the spaces that we're moving in. So for example, at a personal level, you might have neighbors, you might have friends. You might have the person that you connect with every morning at coffee, right? Who are the folks that you engage with or want to engage with that might just see a part of you that's important for you right now in this change, in this sense of um loss of or a sense of I think we start with like loneliness. So I'll go with that, like that sense of where am I and what I want to be doing. The other part I'd say is it's always I talk about these 3 C's of, curiosity, clarity, and confidence in going through change, and when I guess I would the other thing I would position here is getting curious about where you're at right now. So if you're feeling like, "Hey, I don't really have anyone supporting me right now," let's explore that. Like, why do you think that's coming up right now? What are you trying to do that you feel out on your own on? And then with that clarity, right, you can then start to tap into or build a network around you to support in answering that question of what can I be doing to support myself, which then sort of builds that confidence. So I think if that's helpful, or I'd offer that is for those looking for maybe like a model or some language to use. But altogether, I think it's really exploring self, understanding where we're at and how we can with where we're at and what we're looking to do to tap into those that we know could support us or to be an ear or a guide, an insight, an idea, a "you got this" in those times of transition.
Absolutely. And you mentioned something very important that people often see just some part of us, but I think it's in just showing up and, even in the smallest ways and trusting that connection builds over time.
Absolutely. I talk about this a lot in career coaching, which is sometimes we have I'll use the journey of having goals, like something that you're wanting to achieve for yourself. I think it is immensely important to have people around you that support you in that. Back to the board of directors, at a minimum, the people around you that you spend the most time with, how are they either intentionally or unintentionally supporting what you're doing? Which is to say, they may not know your direct goal, but if they're there cheering you on, know to support you when you need it, just things of that nature, I think is key. But back to having goals, sometimes we might have quiet goals, things that we're orienting to on our by ourselves. But I would even in that case ask people to think about the community extends in a lot of other ways, even like on social media, Instagram, TikTok, um, any of the threads. I'm just kind of off the cuff here, but wherever your connected spaces where you're learning and chatting, I think is another opportunity. I also think there are different types of professions out there, things like coaches where people can connect and have those goals be served in a space and supported from a professional. So these are other ways that community can extend and be meaningful in our lives. And I think you and I are now are just kind of talking through like each layer of the extension of community, which is it's wide and vast, which is why it's important to continue to stay centered to where am I headed, what's happening for me right now, and then being able to tap into the community that we have or that we could build and, to move us forward.
Absolutely. And uh, you mentioned a little early on about AI and this community sort of thing when I talk about it in the age of AI. So how do you help leaders navigate AI and technology in their organizations, and how do you help them keep the human piece alive while trusting the connections and community feeling when everything is moving so fast in this age?
Yeah. I think one is the perspective we are certainly moving really fast, and I also think it's from a global perspective impacting different markets and communities differently in that speed, but, it's certainly faster than anything we've ever all seen. And I think it's important to recognize that. The theme you and I have been connecting on is community, and at its core, community is you connect by seeing one another. And what a time to see one another, which is that we're all figuring it out. We are. And so if we start with that as a baseline and we bring that into what AI transformation means for us, to have that moment of we're figuring it out. And so if I'm a leader and I'm leading a team through AI, what is it that I want to figure out together with my team that's going to add more value to our organization? And at a minimum, I might be starting to, who are still early in the journey, to be just even talking about it, talking through some of the fear that people have, whether it's what is this doing for the environment? What is this going to do for my job? I don't know if I have the time or capacity to learn new skills. Like these are all very real fears people are having. To be able to have that conversation, to then start to say, how do we want to think about work differently? I think is another place where leaders can go. And that's in whether that's, uh, I guess what I would offer is to think about in that sense is AI as a tool. And how is this tool going to serve our team? So that could be being a thought partner in ideation, right? Doing market research and expanding our reach and understanding wider and faster than we ever could do before. It could be, gosh, I'd really like to stop doing this annoying task that I just like literally have to do as part of my job, but now I have a tool that can help me with that because not only is it a task that I really is it something I don't love, but by the way, every time we switch tasks, it takes time to come back to our next step. So everything takes time, even if it's just a quick moment. And I think those are at its most simple beginnings, a way to get started. I think from there, and this is like where I think I would put all of that in what is really popular in the what we call AI adoption space. I think the other thing is really recognizing that AI or LLMs have been around for a really long time and they're embedded in a lot of stuff that we do today. But if we're talking about really leading through change in our organizations and leveraging these tools differently, it's actually about, um, thinking intentionally about what is it that, yes, AI can serve us, and 2, where do we wanna evolve with innovation or with doing things differently, and that's the very human part of it, right? The newness is the human, and I think that that is complex. I think it's not just within one team, it's, potentially within a couple of teams, but where leaders play a role is, I think, just even setting that question out there and explaining what does it mean to be asking about or to be building with innovation, for leaders to be curious about where their organization differently curious about where their organization is heading and where their teams can serve. And so this is a little bit broad, but I think this is where, um, depending on where folks are at in their leadership journey, this is just, I think, the next opportunity, which is it's bigger than one task, it's bigger than one um, learning. It's really kind of a different mindset in how we work across. And by the way, the secret to that is community. Because notice I said like work across, and we don't work across without other people.
Absolutely. And I think that's a very important distinction that you made, and that's very important to keep in mind. AI might assist us, but it's also very important to have the human aspects to it. Thank you so much, Carly, for having this conversation. And if anyone wants to continue this conversation or learn more about your work, where do you suggest they find you?
Sure, there's 2 places. I'm most active on LinkedIn with content, conversation. People can also find me at carleewolfe.com, and that's where I have, my coaching, speaking, and other ways and tools and other ways to engage. So happy to, connect with folks in any of those spaces.
Thank you so much, Carly. And to all our listeners, I hope you realize that community is not just who shows up when the things are good for you, it is who stays when things get hard. And you also eventually become a community's part when you be there for someone else when they need you to stay. And I think there's no shame in saying I could use some support right now. That is not the end of leadership. That is where it begins. That is very humane of it. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I'll see you in the next episode very soon.